We all know US and UK are close allies, and that US armed might is far greater than that of UK. But just for argument's sake and to learn what sort of limitations waging warfare across the ocean implies, this video...
Look at how tiny the UK is compared to the US.
Yeah, we're a very small country.
Yeah, it's mad.
We'll explore US invading the United Kingdom. So, with just the airplanes and ships left to count on, is an invasion over the Atlantic viable?
We gonna find out.
Добро пожаловать в штаб-квартире Бинков.
Welcome to Binkov's HQ, and if you like people play joined it, it's gonna first free you can divide the VK if it wanted to. So, could US military successfully invade UK if it wanted to? Some rules will apply. US gets no overseas bases, and all other countries are impassable. Distance from US to UK mainland is pretty big, especially when reaching London.
No overseas military bases. That's one of US's biggest offenses. They got bases all over the world. So by minusing that already, that takes out so much US capabilities, if that makes sense.
Before trying to land any troops, the seas must first be clear of British ships, and Royal Air Force must be suppressed. US has a massive advantage when it comes to naval assets. Basically, all of its assets are made for oceans and could operate near UK if needed. While the Americans would need to sail to and from Britain, taking weeks away from their actual presence, US Navy could pretty much do whatever it pleases near the UK. It's interesting to point out that most of US ships do not carry anti-ship missiles. US Navy prefers to use their carriers for such missions.
We know all about the carriers. Up to 5,000 people are here, and they got the jets on them. That's mad.
Ready to go.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
British Royal Navy is to go down a similar route. Their Harpoon missiles are old and set to be retired soon. Not all ships have them. Only a minor part of the British fleet has modern air defense systems. Basically, the sea war would be fought above the sea and under it, but the British lacked anti-ship missiles for its aircraft. Furthermore, British Tornado aircraft ceased to train for the anti-ship missions almost 2 decades ago. Basically, if UK had to try and do air raids against US fleet, it would be down to 2 weapons: laser-guided bombs and short-range tactical missiles.
Well, that ain't
Brimstone
good.
in particular might be the weapon of choice. While its warhead is tiny, Brimstone 2 has a decent range. Still, against dozens of potent destroyers designed to deal with many anti-ship missiles at once, it's unlikely UK could do much.
Already, I feel like the US has so much more modernization, because the guy who's narrating this is a lot of the things he's saying about the UK is out of date, retiring soon, like these weapons and these ships and these jets. So it seems like the UK are comfortable with their old shit, and they just, maybe because they got allies like the US and they know the US have got it on lock.
I mean, let's be honest. I think US can conquer the
very
UK.
easily,
Of course they
in my
can.
opinion.
They've got the largest navy.
They invest trillions into their military every year.
Yeah.
The
so
UK don't.
they can. I think it just depends on if allies were involved.
Yeah, that's where
But
it
I
gets
feel like
technical.
the US and the UK do have similar allies.
Yeah, and they are allies themselves.
Yeah.
So they're, the whole NATO and all that, they're all together.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like you said, but if it's 1v1 head on head like this,
US will take them
US
out.
will
I'm
wipe
sorry,
them.
man.
Yeah,
They'll take them
we'll
out.
be gone.
Yeah. We ain't got time for that. So let's hope that
That don't happen. Yeah.
No.
British best bet would be their submarines. They're fairly modern.
Okay.
Theoretically, the British could use their ballistic missile subs as attack subs as well, and speed up the entry into service of another astute sub, while keeping one Trafalgar running a bit longer,
fleet
rummaging
is
for
mad.
retired sailors to crew it. Still, the British would be far outnumbered. US submarine fleet dwarfs theirs. Given a bit less time on station and British home advantage when it comes to resupply, the balance of power may not be quite 6-1.
Modern attack subs usually carry supplies for 90-day missions. So you could live in a submarine for 90 days.
3 months.
That's a long time to be underwater in a submarine. Do you know how mad that
God.
is?
How?
How? That is crazy. It's because they built for war, innit? They just somehow managed to do it.
Still, it's no question the British subs would get hunted down within months. Aerial anti-submarine platforms would also play a large role. And while the British could use all their assets, even just the deployable portion of US assets would be enough to force the British subs into hiding. Furthermore, US carrier-based air power would make it hard for British anti-sub helicopters to operate. The main force projection would be done by US carriers, naturally. US could choose whether to use more carriers initially and then have less available later on, or to maintain a smaller number on constant patrol. To defeat the British Air Force, the former is more likely.
That must be so terrifying, seeing, like, imagine someone's in war with the US and they know they've got carriers in their water with 5,000 people in each one and all these technology, and they're just planted in the water near you.
The one that's not highlighted is that island.
I'm not sure. Because I know the UK, so there's London.
I think Wales is up north, and I think that's
That
island.
might be, and that's why it's separated from
Or
us.
that's Scotland.
Could it be Scotland? No. Could it be Scotland?
My geography is so bad, guys.
I really think we are from
Sorry.
the UK, we don't even know. All I know is this bit. I'm very familiar with this all red here.
Basically,
This
what I'm
little
trying to
part.
say is that if anything was to ever happen between the US and the UK,
They're fucked as
I
well.
feel sorry for the part that's not highlighted, because they're literally
They're-
right in the middle.
And they're going to obviously
And I think
get...
that's Ireland.
And they're
or
obviously going to
Scotland.
get collateral damage.
Yeah.
They're not going to be, like, untouched.
Oh no, they're definitely
They're going down with us.
in the middle.
Yeah.
Poor them.
US nominally has 11 carriers, but only 9 air wings. It does have an additional support wing, which is a lot bigger. It may be the source of 1 or 2 more combat wings
Squadrons.
after some months of preparation. But crews aren't the only issue. Lifespan of a carrier necessarily involves lengthy maintenance periods. Important to note is that the
6-month maintenance. That's crazy. That's...
deployable period doesn't mean the carrier can actually be on a mission the whole time. Usually 1 or 2 deployments are made during those 18 months. Missions are usually 6 to 8 months long, and several months are needed to prep
My
the carrier
God.
and its wing for another mission. Shorter missions might give more deployments in the short term, but in the long term they would require even more maintenance for every month spent out at sea. Because of all that, it's unrealistic US would send out more than 6 carriers at once, after a few months of prep time. Similar issues would affect the aviation assault ships. Perhaps 4 to 6 could be deployed at once, after some preparations. Grand total of combat planes US Navy and Marine Corps could muster in a few months
316 total combat planes. That's a lot.
That's a lot of planes.
long air campaign is thus smaller than the total number of US planes. US might fly in fresh planes to replace ones that got lost. Flying them over the ocean to a carrier would be doable. What could the British respond with? Royal Air Force is smaller than even the readily available US planes deployed on carriers. Another huge issue for the British would be their lack of air defenses. Everything they currently have are fairly low altitude systems, meaning the US would be free to bomb them from high up with guided weapons. UK would also suffer the US cruise missile barrage. While the Brits have some such missiles of their own, it's unlikely they would be used against the faraway US bases. Even the subs that could carry them would be better utilized for defense of the homeland. While not all could be launched at once, US could sustain the effort. The British Air Force would be mostly paralyzed on the ground. US has also a much bigger recon platform fleet, especially when it comes to satellites. British lack those, as in the real world they timeshare some US spy satellites. US aircraft would be looking for targets as well.
I feel sorry for UK. We're getting done by every single...
Getting demolished.
They're getting demolished by every single machinery they got. And bear in mind, this is after the US is at a big handicap because they don't have their overseas military bases. Imagine they had that on top. It would just be quadruple what's going on.
But the aircraft is crazy.
Yeah.
We've reacted to a lot of the machinery, and it is mad what we've come across.
We don't even know half of that existed. And it was proper eye-opening. I could see why there's such a super hyper power
Yeah.
in the military now.
Britain would have no real means of scouting the US bases. US AWACS type planes would be plentiful, while British ones would mostly be trapped on the ground, with runways and highways being mostly inoperative. Thus the Royal Air Force would slowly get destroyed on the ground. When they would be able to get some planes airborne, they still may not choose to engage the Americans, as it's likely US attack waves would be made of close to 100 planes with possibly as many fighters as Britain would muster per each local interception, or more. The best Britain could hope for would be a roughly equal kill ratio in the air. And when the losses on the ground are included, over months of a protracted bombing campaign, US would still be left with a sizable force. All this didn't even include the US Air Force. While the scenario requires it to use the bases inside the US, Britain could be reached. At first, bombers would be deploying cruise missiles, but later on they would be likely used for bombing missions. But could the Air Force tactical plane fleet help out as well? With very ample in-flight refueling, the answer
F-15, I'm pretty sure we got a reaction video to that specific plane. Mad.
is yes. US operates the world's biggest air tanker fleet. The Hercules-based tankers, however, are too small and would use most of the fuel just to get near Britain. Still, the remainder of the fleet...
Where's the Warthog at? They should bring the Warthog out.
Where's my Donny Warthog?
Warthog needs to come out. We're saying it against the UK, like as if we're not living here.
Yeah, we don't want it to come out.
Yeah,
we don't.
go back to base.
Stay where you are.
has a substantial fuel offload capacity, and tankers could refuel each other. Such ops may sound complex, but compared to what the British did in Falklands War, they're fairly basic. The British used a dozen tankers to refuel themselves repeatedly, keeping the bomber refueled throughout all of the route. While all of the tanker fleet would not be available due to maintenance, the rest could still offload significant fuel loads just outside Britain if needed. With several refuelings per plane, US Air Force could still expect to have around 400 combat planes in action practically every day. The British would really have no chance in the air. Within months, the US would have complete control of the air.
I think, he said within months, but from the sounds of it, I think if they went all out on the UK, I think it won't even be months, man.
What would it be?
I don't know, like 5 weeks. I don't think it will last long. I think it will be fucked, I'll be honest.
And thus the second phase of the invasion might commence. By that time, British ships would be mostly dead, even if they hugged the shores and just aided in the air defenses. British submarines might hold out a bit longer, if not being used to actively hunt down US ships. But even if British subs managed to kill 2 US vessels for each of their own, final result would be the end of the Royal Navy. So at around 6 months or so into the war, the landings would be mostly unopposed, except for the Royal Army defending the shore.
How old is this video?
2019. So what, five
years old. I'm sure within the last 5 years, like, the British military have updated their...
I bloody hope so.
Technology, have increased their,
capacities.
air forces.
Well, so as the US, it works both ways.
Yeah.
And the UK don't put in the money that the US put in their military. So these last 5 years, that's like 6 trillion gone back into their military in the US. The UK, that's probably like, I don't know, 2 trillion, if that, within 6 years. I don't know what the UK spend is. I have no idea, but we all know US has the highest spend.
Yeah, it's definitely not as...
So if anything, it probably makes it even worse for the UK that it's old. Because the US has only gone madder and the technology has gone madder.
It's true.
They got the railgun now, the fucking lasers and shit.
Of course. 6 months would be enough for US to assemble pretty much all of their active and reserve assets. In addition to landing ships, US could count on numerous cargo assets of its Sea Lift Command and Reserve Fleet in case a port is secured. US Airborne could also help, with the numbers shown probably growing with newly trained paratroopers. Getting additional heavier equipment for them, however, would not be likely, given the time limit. US transport plane fleet is pretty big, and should be able to drop all the airborne troops within days. US could be looking at close to 30,000 troops during the first day, and close to 20,000 more the day after.
Mad.
Subsequent days would see fewer and fewer troops being added, and more supplies being brought in.
I didn't know you was in this.
Who? Me?
Yeah. What are you doing over there? Your little tongue sticking out.
You think it's so funny? Whatever.
The British would enjoy more soldiers than shown before. The reserve mentioned covers only the soldiers receiving some training periodically, and soldiers for whom some heavy equipment is stored.
That's crazy. Look how much more the numbers are on the US active army troops compared to the UK. It's fucking mad. So that's the thing, population-wise, so much bigger the US as well.
They do have more people, hence why their army would be much more larger than the UK.
And they're way more patriotic, where they want to fight for their country. The UK are struggling to recruit for their military. If you go on English television and like stuff like that, all you see is the military begging people to join on adverts. That's all you see. They're trying to sell it to people.
Do you think it's got something to do with... I mean, like, for example...
No? Okay, we'll come back to it.
In an event of a total war, Britain would be using those 6 months to mobilize as many soldiers as possible. While they would be equipped with basically just rifles, and while their training would be less than adequate, they would still boost the overall numbers several times. Yet all those soldiers may not be enough, as UK has a problem of geography. Its landmass is just too large. Its coastline is very long. Even when taking just the western part of its coastline into account, the area to be defended is huge. And what about the islands? Perfect for US to take and entrench themselves at, before launching further landings from them. Most of those...
Isle of Man is technically not part of UK. Where is that?
It's this one here. That's why it's not highlighted.
Oh my gosh, they're literally in the middle of it as well.
They're getting blown up.
I didn't even see them.
They're getting blown up.
That's how tiny they are.
I hate to say it, but they're gone.
Those areas are sufficiently far away from the mainland that British artillery would not be much of a factor. And what about Northern Ireland? There are just too many places.
So that is Ireland. So only Northern Ireland's
That's
considered.
Northern Ireland. So what's that part there?
Or the rest of Ireland, right? It's got to be north of Ireland, so south, west and east.
This is for US to concentrate its assault on. The British would not be able to move their forces around easily and protect those islands or the Northern Ireland. So the islands would fall one by one. Then either Northern Ireland would be taken or part of Great Britain would fall. Hard to traverse overland Scotland would be an obvious choice, though that would also slow down US breakthrough as well later on. Cornwall...
Imagine if like the US is just boosting their army like crazy year on year, and they just want to take out the UK for what happened. Well, you know, when we reacted to that video when the UK...
What happened in the past.
Yeah, when the UK was selling and trying to take over back in...
I was trying to force them to put their flag down.
Yeah, so imagine the US is like holding on to that memory saying, we're building an army, we're going to come.
No,
I don't think that's the case.
That's never going to happen.
But imagine.
I feel like the UK and the US are such on good terms now.
Too good.
Especially when at that time where the UK were going to take over the US as well. That would never happen.
Yeah, their relationship's too strong, and they support each other like crazy.
Unless something crazy was to happen.
Yeah, but I can't even see that happening.
Well,
the UK...
for the sake of all of us, I hope not.
Yeah, the UK respect the US and vice versa.
Cornwall or Devon are also decent picks, as British defenders lack room to swoop down on the US beachhead from all directions. Though such areas would likely be more heavily populated by British military to begin with. Once the US manages to secure ports and airfields and brings in US Army reinforcements, it would be basically game over for the British. US would build up its helicopter force on the areas it has taken, which is considerable.
Look at the capacity.
3,012 total with a 45,000 capacity. Mad. It's just too much. That's how much money.
I have no words.
That's the type of money US are using for the military.
Oh my gosh.
While the British have a fleet of their own to help quickly distribute its forces where needed, their numbers are small. Both sides would of course be losing many helicopters, US to British low-level air defenses and British to US fighter cover, which would continuously be flying over the important areas. The British would have only a small part of shown inventory of heavy weapons present at any one point the US attacks. While US would also not be disembarking thousands of its Abrams tanks or 10,000 of other heavy combat vehicles, the overwhelming fire support coming from various directions would more than make up for it. Fire support from the ships may come in form of MLR units firing from the ships rather than actual gun barrage. US ships still lack long-range gun rounds. Attack helicopters are another way of concentrating force in one area quickly. But again, the British are far outmatched, even if just half of US numbers are present.
I think the only thing the British got going for them is their submarines. Because then it sounds like it, because they got the harpoon things. If it's not for the submarines, they're done. And let's be honest, there's only so much underwater thing can do.
The issue for the Americans would be time.
But also don't forget, the US have a strong navy as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like they've got even better submarines.
Yeah, I assume they would.
Yeah, it sounded like it.
Yeah.
But that's the one good thing the UK has got, like, that can kind of match or compete against.
As the scenario asks what can be achieved within 1 year, US would be under pressure to progress from their multiple beachheads.
My God,
Northern
imagine.
Ireland is likely to fall within the 1 year time limit, but only minor parts of the Great Britain would be overrun by the Americans during the same time period. The British would put up a hell of a fight. Ground troop loss ratio would favor the British somewhat, but when Air Force and Navy losses are added in, where Britain would suffer more heavily, the US would come out fine. With added large chunks of conquered territory, the US could call itself a victor.
Expected.